guys, Andrew Steinmetz, QA/QC Manager with Genco Inc., coming to you with another video today on NEC code. The code I chose today was 110.26, spaces about electrical equipment. So the reason I wanted to go over this one is just so you are aware of all the conditions, what kind of space you need between equipment from different types of material walls, and a big one is the space above equipment. So I wanted to go over those, make sure they're clarified to everyone so everyone is in understanding of this code. So let's just dive right into it. We're going to talk about 110.26, spaces about electrical equipment. Access and working spaces shall be provided and maintained about all electrical equipment to permit ready and safe operations and maintenance of such equipment. Right? So let's go into enhanced content. Spaces about electrical equipment are divided into two separate and distinct categories: working space and dedicated equipment space. The term working space generally applies to the protection of the worker, and dedicated equipment space applies to the space reserved for the future access to electrical equipment and to protection of the equipment from intrusion by non-electrical equipment. Storage of material that blocks access or prevents safe work practices must be avoided at all times. The performance requirements for all spaces about electrical equipment are set forth in this section, right? So let's go into A, working space. A, working space. Working space for equipment operating at 1000 volts nominal or less to ground and likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized shall comply with the dimensions of 110.26A1, A2, and A3, and A4, or as required or permitted elsewhere in this code. Let's read this little note here. Information note NFPA 70E 2018, Standards for Electrical Safety in the Workplace, provides guidance on such as determining severity of potential exposure, planning safe work practices, including establishing an electrically safe work condition, arc flash labeling, and selecting personal protective equipment. Enhanced content. The intent is to provide enough space for the performance of any of the operations listed without jeopardizing workers. Minimum working clearance are not required if the equipment is not likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized. However, access and working space are still required by the opening paragraph of 110.26. Examples of such equipment include panel boards, switches, circuit breakers, controllers, and controls on heating and air conditioning equipment. Note that the word examination includes tasks such as checking for presence of voltage using a portable voltmeter. So even if it doesn't have to be fully worked on while it's live, it still needs to be accessible for you to use your voltmeter and check the voltage on that equipment. So a lot of equipment does fall into this category. And so what we're going to dive into are what the conditions are to what the footage you need space-wise. So let's go here. Depth of working space, number one. The depth of working space in the direction of live parts shall not be less than is specified in table 110.26A1, unless the requirements of 110.26A1A, A1B, or A1C are met. Distance shall be measured from the exposed live parts or from the enclosure or opening if the live parts are enclosed. So there's been confusion on this in the past. If the device closes, if it's in a cabinet, if it has a cover on it, then you are going to be measuring it from the outside of the cabinet. The measurement is not from live parts unless those are exposed live parts at all times. If it has a door, if it has a removable cover, it has to be measured from that cover to wherever you're measuring from. So I wanted to be clear on that. And so right here, we're going to expand this table and go into this. So let's see. Here's the table. So nominal voltage to ground, condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. So 0 to 150 volts is going to be condition 1, 3 feet. Let's go into the conditions actually first. Condition 1, expose live parts on one side of the working space and no live or grounded parts on the other side of the working space, or expose live parts on both sides of the working space that are effectively guarded by insulating materials. So that's condition 1. Condition 2, expose live parts on one side of the working space and grounded parts on the other side of the working space. Concrete, brick, tile, wall. Tile walls shall be considered as grounded. Exposed live parts on both sides of the working space is condition 3. So if you have panels that face each other on either side of the room and they're directly facing each other, then that's condition 3. If at least one of them is a 480 panel, 277 480 panel. The 120 panel falls into here, even though it has 120 250. One phase is going, it's only going to fall into condition 1. And then anything more is going to be here. So panels facing each other, 4 feet, for, if it's 480, 277. Condition 1, 3 feet, grounded, 3 feet 6 inches. You have to add that if it's grounded, and then 3 feet. So let's go into some pictures about that. So this may better explain it. Let me just find that here. So here we go. And let me just move my floating head so you can see this. It doesn't really help. We'll just do it like that. I'm just floating here. Condition 1, 0 to 600 volt, 3 feet. So that's wood, that's drywall, all those materials. You only have to have 3 feet if it's across from there. Condition 2, grounded material. So they're talking about the moisture and everything that's in concrete that could be grounded. So concrete walls, block walls, tile walls, you're going to have to go 3 feet to 3 feet 6 inches. So right here, 0 to 150 volt, 3 feet, 151 volt to 600 volt, minimum 3.5 feet. Condition 3, and then here's where we fall into this, is that you've got a panel on this side and a panel on this side. So condition 1, it's still 3 feet. Condition 2, 0 to 150 volt, minimum 3 feet. 151 to 600 volt, minimum 4 feet, right? So you got to have 4 feet between these two covers here. And I have some other pictures here we can show. 600 to 1000 volt, 5 feet. So that's going to be your bigger equipment, right? Can't be across from there. Drywall or insulated surface. So 3 feet. We got that from here to here. So this is considered grounded equipment, right? Or grounded material, because it's block or it's going to be concrete. So you're going to need 3 feet 6 inches on 480 277 volt. And here's another graph for that. No live grounded parts, minimum distance, and 3 feet 3 feet. Condition 1, grounded parts right here, 0 to 150, 3 feet, 151 to 600 volt, 3.5 feet. And then electrical equipment, opposite electrical equipment. And that's condition 3, 0 to 150 volt, 3 feet, 151 to 600 volt, 4 feet. All right, that's going to be the next one. We'll go over that next. A, dead front assemblies. Working space shall not be required in the back or sides of assemblies, such as dead front switchboards, switchgear, or motor control centers, where all connections and all renewable or adjustable parts, such as fuses or switches, are accessible from locations other than the back or sides. Where rear access is required to work on non-electrical parts on the back of the enclosed equipment, a minimum horizontal working space of 30 inches shall be provided. B, low voltage. By special permission, smaller working spaces shall be permitted where all exposed live parts operate at not greater than 30 volts, 42 volts, or 60 volts. Existing buildings. In existing buildings where electrical equipment is being replaced, Condition 2 working clearance shall be permitted between dead front switchboards, switchgear, panel boards, or motor control centers located across the aisle from each other, where conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure the written procedures have been adopted to prohibit equipment on both sides of the aisle from being open at the same time and qualified persons. So that's actually a stipulation I wanted to go over, and we'll go over that coming up here. So table 110.26A1 provides requirements for clearance from equipment to ground or underground, ungrounded objects and exposed live parts based on the circuit voltage to ground. The following exhibit illustrates the general working clearance requirements for each of the three conditions listed in table 110. So we're just going to show this again. 150 nominal or less, condition 1, 3 feet insulated. Grounded concrete, right here, 150 or less, 3 feet. Condition 2, 3.5 feet, 151 to 600, 3 feet. Condition 3, space would increase to 4 feet for 151 to 600 volts. Okay, got that? That's if it's 150, but space would increase 4 feet to 151. Examples of common electrical supply systems covered in the 0 to 150 volts to ground group are 120 240 volt, single phase, 3-wire, and 208 120, 3-phase, 4-wire systems. Examples of common electrical supply systems covered in the 151 to 1000 volts to ground group are 240 volt, 3-phase, 3-wire 480 277, 3-phase, 4-wire, and 480 volt, 3-phase, 3-wire, ungrounded, and corner grounded systems. Where an ungrounded system is used, the voltage to ground by definition is the greatest voltage between the given conductor and any other conductor of the circuit. For example, the voltage to ground for a 480 volt ungrounded delta system is 480 volts. For assemblies such as switchboards, switchgears, or motor control centers that are accessible from the back and exposed live parts, the working clearance dimensions are required at the rear of the equipment. For condition 3, where enclosures are on opposite sides of the working space, the clearance for only one working space is required. So if you have them on either side, what that's saying is you don't have to double it and make it, 8 feet. So, because they are requiring that you only have one open at a time. Dead front assemblies. In many cases, equipment of dead front assemblies requires only front access. The workspace described in 110.26A1 is required for any side of the equipment from which access to live parts or other maintenance is required. For equipment that requires rear access for non-electrical maintenance, such as replacing a filter, a reduced working space of at least 30 inches must be provided. The exhibit below shows reduced working space for 30 inches at the rear of the equipment to allow work on non-electrical parts such as replacement of air filters. So if there is access in the back of the equipment and it's for maintenance of non-electrical related items, then you only need 30 inches clearance from any exposure on the other side. Okay. Existing buildings. This section permits some relief for existing building equipment being replaced. If it is not practical to increase the existing workspace, the following exhibit illustrates a permitted reduction from a condition 3 to a condition 2 clearance. So right here, 480, aisle workspace is insufficient for simultaneous access to equipment on both sides. So you're allowed to do the condition 2, which is 3.5 feet, if it's existing, right? Okay, so that's there. Width of working space. The width of the working space in front of the electrical equipment shall be the width of the equipment, or 762 millimeters, 30 inches, whichever is greater. In all cases, the workspace shall permit at least 90-degree opening of equipment doors or hinges. So around equipment, it needs to be at the very least 30 inches of space for that equipment. So they can't be right next to each other. Or if the equipment is actually larger than 30 inches, then the equipment space for that is whatever the width is of the equipment you're installing. Regardless of the width of the electrical equipment, the working space cannot be less than 30 inches wide. This space allows an individual to have at least shoulder width space in front of the equipment. The 30-inch measurement can be made from either the left or the right edge of the equipment and can overlap other electrical equipment, provided the equipment does not extend into the working space of the other equipment. If the equipment is wider than 30 inches, the space must be equal to the width of the equipment following the exhibit in 30 inches. And I just wanted to go back here. So you got to also make sure that the doors can open 90 degrees. So that's a big one. If it has a door on it, it has to be able to be open 90 degrees. But here it shows the 30 inches, and you got to have 30 inches space. They can overlap. Minimum headroom of 6.5 feet, 90 degree here, 30 inch, overlap 30 inch, and then there's your 30 inch there with the 90 degree. Sufficient depth in the working space is also required to allow a panel or door to open at least 90 degrees. If doors or hinged panels are wider than 3 feet, more than a 3-foot deep working space must be provided to allow a full 90-degree opening as shown below. Doors are often part of bolted equipment covers. The 90-degree requirement applies only to the hinge doors. It does not require that the bolted covers be capable of swinging 90 degrees. So when you have a door, you have to be able to open it 90 degrees, or that's going to be a violation. So this is the next one I wanted to go into, is the height of the working space. The workspace shall be clear and extended from the grade floor platform to a height of 2 meters to 6.5 feet, or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. Within the height requirements of this section, other equipment or supported structures such as concrete pads associated with the electrical installation and located above or below the electrical equipment shall be permitted to extend not more than 6 inches beyond the front of the electrical equipment. So concrete pads, support structures for, when the housekeeping pads that we put in and everything, those can't extend more than 6 inches in front of your equipment. Exception number 2, in existing dwelling units, service equipment or panel boards that do not exceed 200 amperes shall be permitted in spaces where the height of the working space is less than 6.5 feet. Exception number 3, meters that are installed in meter sockets shall be permitted to extend beyond the other equipment. The meter socket shall be required to follow the rules of this section. This requirement allows the placement of a 12-inch by 12-inch wireway on the wall directly above or below a 6-inch deep panel board without encroaching on the workspace. The requirements prohibit large differences in depth of equipment below or above other equipment that specifically requires working space. Freestanding dry-type transformers are not permitted to be installed where they would extend into the workspace for a wall-mounted panel board, compromising clear access to the panel board. So there is a stipulation in here about that you can't put a much deeper gutter or box in that 6.5 feet space near a panel board, because that encroaches on the workspace, and you can't hang a dry transformer above it either. So the next one I want to go into, so limited access, where equipment operating at 1,000 volts nominal or less, the ground likely to require examination, adjusting service, or maintenance while energized is required by installation instructions or function to be located in the space with limited access, all shall apply. So actually the one I really wanted to go into, so because you're probably not going to be working on the 1,000 volts, but you could be, but I don't think that one's as important right now. What I want to go into is the space above, right? Because this is something you're going to use with other trades coming in and putting their stuff above our switchboard, our switch gear and everything. So let's get to that. So dedicated workspace, there it is. Indoor installation shall comply with 110.26 E1A through E1D. Dedicated electrical space, the space equal to the width and depth of the equipment and extending from the floor to a height of 6 feet above the equipment or to the structural ceiling, whichever is lower, shall be dedicated to the electrical installation. No piping, ducts, leak protection apparatus, or other equipment foreign to the electrical installation shall be located in this zone. Exceptions: suspended ceilings, removable panels shall be permitted within the 6 feet zone. Foreign systems: the area above the dedicated space required in 110.26 E1A shall be permitted to contain foreign systems, provided protection is installed to avoid damage to the electrical equipment from condensation, leaks, breaks, and such foreign objects. So that's if it is preventing the leaks in the foreign system. Sprinkler protection shall be permitted for the dedicated space where the piping complies with this section. Suspended ceiling: a drop, suspended, or similar ceiling does not add strength to the building structure, not be considered a structural ceiling. This requirement applies only to switchboards, panel boards, switchgear, or motor control centers. The dedicated electrical space extends the footprint of the equipment from the floor to the height of 6 feet above the height of the equipment or to the structural ceiling, whichever is lower. The dedicated space is required to be clear of piping, ducts, leak protection apparatus, or equipment foreign to the electrical installation. Plumbing, heating, ventilation, air conditioning pipe, ducts, and equipment must be installed outside the space. Busway, conduits, raceway, and cables are permitted to enter the equipment through this zone because they're electrically related. Foreign systems installed directly above the dedicated space reserved for electrical equipment are required to include protective equipment that ensures that occurrences such as leaks, condensation, and even breaks do not damage the electrical equipment located below. So that's if you have anything above it, outside that 6 feet, and it's going directly above the equipment, they have to have special protection from leaks and put that into place on their equipment. Sprinkler protection is permitted for the dedicated space. The sprinkler or other suppression system piping must comply with 126E. A drop, suspended, or similar ceiling is permitted to be located directly in the dedicated space because they are not considered structural ceilings. Building structural members are also permitted in the space. The 3 exhibits that follow illustrate the 2 distinct indoor installation requirements of 110.26A and 110.26E, the working space and dedicated electrical space. The dedicated electrical space is reserved for the installation of electrical equipment and for the installation of conduits, cable trays, and so forth, entering or exiting that equipment. The outlined area in front of the electrical equipment in the exhibit below is the working space required by 110.26A. Note the sprinkler protection is afforded the entire dedicated electrical space and working space without actually entering either space. Also note the exhaust duct is not located in or directly above the dedicated electrical space. So here's the big example. All this space up here is your dedicated electrical space. And during my inspections, I've actually caught a couple of times where the plumbers have run straight over this space and right over our equipment in that space. And they had to change it. They had to move their pipe. They are not allowed per code to go into that dedicated space, right? So no air ducts, no exhaust ducts, anything 6 feet above the equipment and the same depth as the equipment, all surrounding that is not available in there. It's also 6.5 feet, this dedicated space, right? So that whole 3 feet, 4 feet that we were talking about, 3.5 feet, that extends to the height of the equipment or 6.5 feet, whichever is lower. So if the equipment extends higher, then it's that height. If the equipment is shorter than 6.5 feet, then it extends to 6.5 feet. So not only do you have to have this workspace in front here, but that extends all the way up to the height of the equipment. Now, you don't get this dedicated electrical space over here in your working space, but it is up to 6.5 feet. That has to be clear. Nothing can be in there. The next exhibit illustrates the working space required in front of a panel board by 110.26A. No equipment, electrical, or otherwise is allowed in that working space. So this is showing a side view and a front view, right? So luminaires are permitted. The sprinkler fire pipe is permitted. above the working space. You see that it's not directly above the panel, it's in the working space. And you have to have 30 inches from any other equipment on this right here, except if it's another panel, they can overlap. The exhibit below illustrates the dedicated electrical space above and below the panel board required by 110.26 E1. This space is for the cables, raceways, and so on that run to and from the panel board. So another side view, dedicated space. So it's right there, under, above it. And you can see this is not in there. The pipe is out here, it's permitted. But so nothing is allowed to come through that area right there from this depth all the way up to 6.5 feet or to the structural ceiling. And basically that's just what I want to go over. We'll go over outdoor on another video, but I hope that it cleared up some confusion, and hopefully you understand this. And if any of the other trades try to go in that space, then you just tell them, that's not up to code. You can't have it there. Talk to your PM, talk to the GC. Nothing is allowed in that space, 6 feet above our panel boards, gear or anything. And then make sure you have the right working space, that you're measuring from the front of the cabinets and making those correct conditions, 1, 2, or 3. So I hope that helped, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks.